is unprecedented in the way that Justin Amash described it. That is unprecedented in American history, and the way that Governor Gilmore described it. Senator Graham did not stop there. He said, and this is a quote, one of these suspects, this is a quote, "When they say I want to talk to a lawyer, we tell them, shut up, you don't get a lawyer." That's a quote from Senator Lindsey Graham. Folks, it is a new day in the United States of America when a supposed leader can get up there on Capitol Hill and push for such legislation and thinks that this is any way within the American tradition that our founders intended. I mean, we've reached a new day in American politics. You know, guys like Senator Lindsey Graham and John McCain and Joe Lieberman and now Barack Obama and certainly George W. Bush and Hillary Clinton told us for years and years and years that we have to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here. How many times have we heard that throughout the war on terror? Well, now they're telling us we have to fight them over here, and Americans' constitutional protections must go by the wayside to help protect you. That is a new day in America. It's unprecedented, and it's scary. Senator Rand Paul pointed out during this debate, quote, "Should we err today and remove some of the most important checks on state power in the name of fighting terrorism, well, then the terrorists have won." And he's absolutely right. If in the name of fighting them over there, we give up some of our constitutional liberties, that is absolutely horrible. And then to say, well, we're going to give them up at home, people on American soil, you're just going to give them up across the board because this is also a battlefield? The terrorists have won. I don't know what guys like Senator Lindsey Graham trying to think they're accomplished. Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, mission accomplished. They did it. We're giving up the things that make us Americans the most. Our heritage protections, our constitutional protections. And let me give you an example of how scary this is. You know, when al-Awlaki was killed, the Al-Qaeda collaborator overseas, an American citizen, that was very controversial about the assassination, and it should have been. Now you're saying you can do the same thing, really, if you follow it logically, with the indefinite detention of Americans here? That is tyranny. That is tyranny to the nth degree. Let's put this into a little bit more current context, or at least within the last 2 decades. The idea that you can arrest an American citizen without trial, without due process, just forget everything about habeas corpus, is something that is so dangerous to everybody in this room. I attended a speech that Jim Gilmore was speaking at, and he said, you know, I'm not so worried about the terrorist that gets caught today, or tomorrow, or the next day, or next year, but what happens to you or I the year after that, or 5 years from now, or 10 years, or 20 years. When you give government that kind of power, it is never relinquished. You know, one of the wisest things I think that Ronald Reagan ever said, that there's nothing closer to eternal life on this earth than a government program or a government bureaucracy. I'm paraphrasing, and he's absolutely right. That also goes for government power. They do not relinquish it. The reason we have a constitution in the first place is to safeguard against these sorts of dangers. The founders understood what would happen when the federal government, the central government, could assume, had the power to assume these powers. And that's why we had a constitutional limit. And according to Lindsey Graham, we just tell people to shut up. They have no Fourth Amendment, that none of that matters. Now, let's look back in time. Some people in this room might remember this or know about it. In 1996, there was a terrorist bombing in Centennial Park in Atlanta. Some people might remember that. There was a gentleman named Richard Jewell who was accused of that. Does anybody remember Richard Jewell in this? Okay, you remember, and he was a security guard. A bomb went off, a few people were killed, some were maimed. It was absolutely horrible, definitely a terrorist act designed to frighten citizens, which is the definition of terrorism. Well, this security guard helped usher people away to safety. And afterward, the FBI decided that, well, he fits a terrorist profile of sorts. This guy's sort of a loner, and we looked at him as a suspect, and they started to consider him a primary suspect in this case. Before too long, the news media picked this up. It became a vicious news cycle. Some of the late-night talk host guys were calling him the Unibubba. This is a Georgia boy, a security guard, comparing him to the Unabomber. David Letterman would make jokes, but the reason I'm bringing this up, in the court of public opinion, he'd been tried. He was considered a terrorist by a majority of Americans at that time. That he did this. He harmed these people. Well, lo and behold, he did absolutely nothing. He was completely exonerated. He was an innocent man. And in fact, he was a hero. More people would have died if he and his role as a security guard had not performed his duties that day. Well, under the non-constitution of Senator Lindsey Graham and the new America post 9/11 and the the America that the founders could have never foreseen, Richard Jewell could have been arrested, thrown away, locked up, thrown away the key for forever. No trial. He's a terrorist. How do we know? Well, we just know. Who decides that? And that's where we are in the United States today. That is scary, folks. That is without precedent in our history. You know, a lot of people talk about the moral decline of the United States, and it's always attached to social issues. The sanctity of life, the sanctity of marriage, just different things that we talked about. Those are all concerns, and some people fall on each side of that issue. Well, I dare say that the most important moral principles we hold close is our idea of what makes us American, and so much of that is our constitutional protections. I mean, it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Let me give you an example of this within a more modern political context, what's happening with this election right now. You've got a Republican field running for president, all of these guys except one, and I see a few advertisements for him in here. You know what I'm talking about. Where, you know, Mitt Romney, Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, all these guys, it's sort of become standard to say, oh yeah, I'm for waterboarding. That's great. I'm for the Patriot Act. We don't need the Fourth Amendment. I'm a constitutional conservative, except the Fourth Amendment. We don't need that. That's sort of standard Republican rhetoric at this point. Well, just to show you how far we've come, how far we've gone, this is what Newt Gingrich had to say in 1997. And we've all paid attention to Newt Gingrich in this election cycle. This is what he had to say in 1997 when President Clinton visited with the president of China. And think about this while I'm saying it. This is Newt Gingrich, quote, "There is no place for abuse in what must be considered the family of man. There is no place for torture and arbitrary detention. There is no place for forced confessions. The roots of American rule of law go back more than 700 years to the signing of the Magna Carta. The foundation of American values, therefore, is not a passing priority or a temporary trend." That is the exact opposite of what he espouses today. And that's not to pick on Newt Gingrich. That's the exact opposite of what most conventional Republican politicians think of as conservatism. That's how far we've come in a post-Bush Republican Party to now a Barack Obama Democratic Party who basically agrees with everything George W. Bush said about these issues. I mean, if you guys like Newt Gingrich are flip-floppers on issues like this, look at what some of the liberals now put up with under this president as it relates to civil liberties. I'll give you one more example. You know, everybody on the Republican side is a Reagan Republican. Look at me, I'm a Reagan Republican. He mentioned me one time in his book. I must be a Reagan Republican. Well, you know, yeah, that's how silly this has gotten. But the last time we prosecuted for waterboarding in this country was in 1986. It was Reagan's Department of Justice. It was police officers in Texas who used waterboarding on a detainee or suspect. Reagan's Department of Justice prosecuted these people, found them guilty, and defined waterboarding as torture. Issued statements saying that we don't do this in America, this is un-American, it's unconstitutional. Well, where's that Reagan Republican? I really don't see them too much, except maybe the one guy who's advertised throughout the audience tonight. And I bring that up just to show, talking about moral decline, that's how far we continue to devolve. What was unthinkable yesterday, you can't arrest an American citizen, we have Fourth Amendment and due process, you can now do. We're America, we're against torture. Not only can you do it, but some people think that's a helpful campaign tool. That's where we're at in the United States. It scares the hell out of me, and it should scare the hell out of most Americans, because where are we going to be in another 5 years? Or 10 years? You know, Benjamin Franklin warned that when you give up liberty for security, you get neither. Lindsey Graham tells us that if you're a suspect, shut up, you don't get a lawyer. That's how far we've come in the name of protecting us, and it's not protecting us, it's destroying America. Well, we're going to get on to our panelists now, and our first speaker this evening is going to be Mr. Jacob Hornberger. Jacob, if you'd like to join us.